Welcome back to Steel City Sports. So today we're going to be talking about my NFC playoff team predictions. A couple days back we did the AFC, so I'll put a link in the description if you missed that video. But let's get right into my NFC playoff teams right now. Winning the NFC North, I have the Detroit Lions. So they obviously won this division last year. I have them repeating as division champions. Don't get me wrong, this has the chance to be the best division in the NFL for this season. You have the Packers. They were a playoff team last year. The Vikings have one of the best coaching staffs in the league and an incredible collection of offensive talent. And the Bears, I think, are going to be one of the most improved teams in the NFL next season. So it's not going to be easy for Detroit, but I think that they will win this division simply because they have the best roster in this division, from player to player, unit by unit. You could argue this is a top 3 roster in the entire league with a top 10 quarterback, top 5 receiver, arguably the best offensive line in football, the best running back tandem in football. And when you look at defense, they've got a star pass rusher. They've been adding really high-end young talent to this defense. And their biggest concern last year on their defense was by far and away their secondary. And I think they did a great job of addressing that in the offseason, getting Terrion Arnold in the first round of the draft and getting Carlton Davis from Tampa. He's a really good starting corner. So I just think this roster is too loaded. They were able to keep Ben Johnson at offensive coordinator. You could argue is the best play-calling OC in the league. Obviously, Dan Campbell's really good as well. So tough division, but Detroit is just loaded. In winning the NFC East, I have the Philadelphia Eagles. They won this division 2 years ago, obviously went to the Super Bowl. Last year, they started off 11-0 and then completely self-imploded last year. We've talked about that ad nauseum on this channel, but I will summarize really quickly. I think it comes down to the fact that Nick Sirianni at head coach is incompetent. He doesn't provide anything to this team. So if your coordinators suck when you have a coach like that, your team is going to get exposed. That's what happened with the Eagles last year. They had coordinators that were in over their head. Now they have 2 rock-solid coordinators with Kellen Moore, who's been a proven successful OC with Dallas, and then Vic Fangio, arguably a top 5 defensive coordinator in the NFL. So that's the biggest thing for me. If they were running it back with the same coordinators from last year, I don't know if I'd have the Eagles as a playoff team. But now they have competent people in there running it. Even though I am worried Sirianni's still the head coach, he doesn't have his hands on play calling on either side. So that kind of washes that at least. From a roster standpoint, this team is loaded, especially on the offensive side of the ball. This is literally a Pro Bowl team on the offensive side of the ball. Like, obviously, losing Kelsey to retirement sucks, but you still have a top 5 O-line in the NFL right now. Jalen Hurts, I know there's a lot of people out there that are doubters of Jalen Hurts, but the guy's persevered everywhere he's gone. He outdueled Patrick Mahomes not that long ago. I still think he's a stud. This is definitely a big year for him. I think he's going to live up to it. He's got 2 Pro Bowl receivers, A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith, and they added Saquon Barkley, who I think is going to tear it up with Philly this year. And defensively, similar to what we just said about Detroit, they had a lot of secondary problems last year as well, where their veterans between Big Play Slay and Bradbury, they were just washed last year. They were not very good. And I think they did, similar to what we just said about the Lions, they did a really good job of addressing that, particularly in the draft, with their first and second round picks both going to corners. Quinyon Mitchell, I think, is the best corner in this class, and then Cooper DeJean in the second round. A lot of people thought he was a first-round talent, so I think they did a really good job of addressing the secondary issue, the coordinator issue, and the icing on top is they brought in Saquon Barkley, arguably a top 3 back in the league right now. And winning the NFC West, I have the San Francisco 49ers. They have been a juggernaut in the NFL for like half a decade, so it's hard for me to pick against them in this division, even though I do really like the Rams. I just think their roster is so much better than any other team in this division. And, I'm going to sound like a broken record because we always say the same stuff about the Niners, but it's true. They have the Avengers on offense. Even with the Brandon Ayuk stuff, I think no matter what, Brandon Ayuk plays this year in a Niners jersey. So you got Debo, Brandon Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle. This offense is just too stacked, and that's why they've been such a dominant team. They play a smash-mouth physical style of football. I will say, though, about the Niners, and this is probably something we're going to talk a lot about throughout the season, is I feel like this is realistically their final year of their Super Bowl window. This is the last chance they have with the current rendition of this team to win the Super Bowl, because Brandon Ayuk, if they tag him, I don't even know if Ayuk would play on a tag. I doubt it. So that's going to get weird really quick. Trent Williams wants a raise, deservedly so. He's not getting any younger. George Kittle, McCaffrey, Debo, they all play, like we said, very physical style football. They're not going to last forever. They're not getting any younger. So, and of course, you're also going to have to pay Brock Purdy in a couple of years. So I think the Niners have to go all in this season. It's make it or break it this year for the 49ers. They've got to win because I just don't see a realistic path forward in the next couple of years with these guys getting older. Winning the NFC South, I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, so I feel like this is always the division year to year where it could be any of these teams, probably not Carolina, but the other three teams in this division, I think all have a realistic chance of winning this division. It really just comes to how it plays out. For the Saints, I did pick them to win this division last year, you could make a good case for the Saints because they won 9 games last year and their offense sucked. And they got a new offensive coordinator, Kubiak's kid. It's hard for me to imagine the Saints' offense being worse than it was last year, and they won 9 games. So the Saints, definitely a real threat. The Falcons as well. I think they had a pretty solid offseason. Not perfect because I still don't like the Kirk Cousins-Penix thing. I think you should have went one way or the other. Either sign Kirk and build a win-now team or draft Penix and try to build up your young talent. And they kind of are trying to do this 2-timeline thing. I don't love that in Atlanta. So I'm going with, I think, the most safe pick for the NFC South, and that was last year's division champion, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They virtually brought back all their guys, pretty much. They lost a couple guys like Carlton Davis, but pretty much their entire roster is back. You got the great receiver duo of Evans and Godwin. You got Baker coming off his best season as an NFL player who just got a contract. And I think Baker Mayfield, he always had the talent. It was always the maturity issues. And I think last year Baker was kind of humbled and he finally was able to figure it out. He was really good last year. Their defense, definitely older. They don't have the same guys from their Super Bowl roster, but still an extremely talented roster for their defense. And I like their head coach, Todd Bowles. I think he's one of the best defensive minds in the game right now. So I'm not as sure on this one. Like I said, this division I think is the most up in the air, but I'm just going to go with the safe pick here with Tampa, who did win a playoff game last year. And my first wild card team is the Green Bay Packers. So obviously the first thing we got to talk about is Jordan Love. Based off that run he had last year, it's hard for me to not think they're going to be a playoff team. Many people regard him as a top 10 QB now for good reason. That second half last year was just unreal. Led them to a playoff win over the 2-seeded Dallas Cowboys and almost beat the 49ers. People kind of forget that. And here's the thing about Jordan Love and the contract and all that. If he's just able to be like 80% of what he was in that stretch last year, they're going to be really good. But there's a good chance he's actually better than he was. That was technically like his rookie year last year. It was the first time he was the full-time starter. So it's hard for me to believe that he's not going to get even better than he was the second half of last year. So that's obviously a big reason why they paid him the contract. It's not only for what he did, but what he's going to become. And he can be really, really good. And then they've just surrounded him with a lot of really good talent. They have an incredibly young, talented receiver core with Romeo Doubs, Christian Wilkins, and with Wicks. And they went out and got Josh Jacobs, who's been one of the best backs since he's gotten the NFL. And I think their defense will be vastly improved as well. They fired their defensive coordinator, Barry, brought in a new guy. And they still have some really high-end players on that defense like Jair Alexander. They got McKinney from the Giants. I really like that pickup. And their pass rush, I think, is going to be improved as well. So overall, it's a really good roster. But if Jordan Love is even better, they could even threaten to win this division, honestly. For the second team making the wild card spot in the NFC, I do have the Los Angeles Rams, just another team loaded with great talent. Matthew Stafford, when he's healthy, I think is like the 6th or 7th best quarterback in the NFL right now. To pair that with 2 legit number 1 receivers with Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua. Kyron Williams is a touchdown machine. They revamped their O-line. They have the second best coach in the league, in my opinion, with Sean McVay. And their defense is young, but it's really talented. They've been able to find those diamond-in-the-rough type players, particularly Kobe Turner, who I think is poised for a massive breakout year. I think he's going to be a Pro Bowler this year. He had 9.5 sacks just as a rookie, So really young team, but a lot of talent. And when Stafford's upright, I think they can compete with the best teams in the NFL. We saw them do that last year. Final wild card spot in the NFC, I do have the Chicago Bears. Now, this might be viewed as a controversial pick. I don't think so, because when you just look at this roster on paper, it's hard for me to not believe they're going to be a playoff team with the amount of talent that they have on this roster. I mean, and it's not like a rookie quarterback making it is some unprecedented thing. We just saw C.J. Stroud do this in Houston, and if Caleb is just like 70 or 80% of what CJ was last year, it's hard for me to think they're not going to be a playoff team. And Caleb, obviously, by far a more hyped up prospect than CJ Stroud was. So I'm not saying it's going to happen, but what if Caleb Williams is even better than CJ was last year? I don't think that'll happen, but it's a possibility. And then you just look at the talent they've surrounded Caleb with the great receivers, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and Rome Odunze. They've rebuilt their offensive line. That's on the rise. They brought in DeAndre Swift, a really good running back. And the defense, of course, I think is going to be really good, because you look last year after the Montez Sweat trade, their defense was actually elite. To pair all that together, that's a lot of talent. It's a lot of firepower. I think they're going to be able to stay in any game. But obviously, it all rests on the shoulders of Caleb Williams. So I get it. That's why this is a controversial pick, because he is so unproven. I would bet on him working out, but there's a chance maybe he's a generational bust. We don't know. But that's my final pick. Those have been my NFC playoff teams. Definitely let me know down in the comments your playoff teams. If you noticed, I don't have the Cowboys making the playoffs. I just put out a video yesterday of all my reasonings why I don't see them as a playoff team, so you can definitely go check that out. I'll put a link for the AFC version of this video. But if you made it this far, really appreciate you listening. Please like and subscribe.